Hey, Mitch,
Hey, Ed.
do you want to go on a routine expedition?
Sure. Do you mind if I bring these glowing crystals with me?
Yeah, why not? Because we're headed to the land of the lost.
Lost.
Hi, this is Ed Dollister, and welcome to Mitch and Ed's Excellent Adventure. We've got another interesting 70s flashback to cover today. But first of all, a big thank you to everyone who has subscribed and also who has watched and liked and commented on the show. I'm Ed Dollister.
And I'm Mitch Halleck.
And we're going back to the land of the lost. Do you have fond memories of this TV show, Mitch?
Oh, I do, Ed. I was there back in 1974. Now, I know I'm a couple years older than you.
Mhm.
So if I was about 8 watching it, you were 4. But then the question goes, did they even have it on in Australia at the same time in 1974?
They certainly did. They had it.
Really?
Yeah, they did. It was now. I can't remember. I think it was probably a few years later that we got it,
Okay.
but it was around that time. Not long after HR Puffin stuff, which we definitely got. Siggy and the Sea Monsters, which we got, and I remember watching and enjoying
Sigmund.
those.
Siggy.
And it was what?
It's
call him
Sigmund in the Sea Monster, not
Yeah, but I
Siggy.
call him Siggy.
Oh, I didn't know you had a personal relationship with him. But
I do.
Sure,
Edmund,
I guess.
Sigmund. We were like
Sigmund.
brothers. And
Right.
except he had worse teeth than me. That's how I was.
Easy now, Ed. Easy
Yeah.
now.
Anyway, so I
Yeah.
do remember watching Land of the Lost. It was part of the I suppose the umbrella underneath Sid and Marty Krofft. So
Oh, yeah. Well, Ed, did you
Yeah.
know Sid and Marty Krofft, brothers they be, were doing puppeteering way back in the 50s? Did you know that, Ed?
I did not know that.
Did you know Sid was part of the Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey Circus, and he was famous for his puppet act? And here's a little behind the scenes trick. He would actually hire little people
Mhm.
to dress up as part of his puppet show. So he would, in fact, have real puppets,
Yes.
and then he would do a scene where he'd cut the strings, and the puppets would keep on walking. And to the mystification of the audience, they didn't know how he did it, not realizing they were actually real people
Yes.
under those costumes and stuff. So that's how Sid started. And then Marty came along, and who's the older brother, actually from Canada, the two of them. They're Canadian brothers. And they said, hey, why don't we try a TV show? And you can find it, I think it's on one of the extras, maybe on the DVD set of the HR Puffin stuff one. But they actually came out in 1957 with a TV show called Irving. It was a puppet show.
Mhm.
It was not that great. It wasn't well received. Let's call a spade a spade. It was not a good show, Ed.
That might be a
So-
theme of their work. I had to say.
Well, no. So what happens is they come back, and like you said, they started doing a string of shows. And the reason why it looks a little odd is because the thinking was between the brothers, what do kids like? They like cartoons.
Mhm.
So they said, instead of drawing it, which was a very expensive process to animate, they said, why don't we just make sets that look like that and make makeup and characters that look like the cartoons? We're going to make a living cartoon.
Mhm.
So that's what they did. They used their puppets to create the world of Puffin stuff and the Bugaloos and
Lidsville as well.
and and the Siggy and the Sea Monsters and all that stuff. So that's what they became known for, is these puppeteer shows, and kind of like Jim Henson, but more geared towards just entertainment, not education.
Yes.
And then what happened is, like you said, they became wildly popular with the kids because it was the late 60s, early 70s, and HR Puffin stuff, you just can't get enough. And Lidsville, and they were kind of spacey,
They were pretty out there. I remember HR Puffin
psychedelic.
stuff. Yeah, absolutely. HR Puffin stuff, which was pretty crazy. I was terrified of Witchy Poo. And
Yeah.
and the magic flute, Jimmy.
Jimmy,
Used
yeah,
to-
yeah,
That used to
absolutely. Yeah.
that used to freak me out because it
You know
was,
what they had great?
yeah.
They had those great opening songs that introduced the whole show and set up the whole premise, like
Yes.
Gilligan's Island. If you never saw any other episodes and just watched one, you could get up to speed really quick, because in the opening it would say, here's a guy named Jimmy and he's got a little flute and he goes on a little raft to a magical land and he meets HR Puffin stuff. And it's like, you got it all within a minute or so.
Well, and I suppose that is exactly the case with Land of the Lost, because they didn't actually. When I went to when we were talking about the show, I went back to my box set here and watched the first episode, because my memory of it is a little hazy. And I watch it going, okay, well, we'll find out how they get there, and the build up, and it all happens in the opening song.
Yeah,
and
the
then
opening song.
And then the first episode, they're plonked, and they've been stranded for at least a little while already.
Yeah. Well, not many opening songs can really take advantage of the banjo.
Marshall, Will, and Holly.
That's a real 70s thing. I mean, I think maybe the Dukes of Hazzard had a banjo, but other than that, I can't recall any other show that started off with a banjo. And you're right. And the thing that got me, it's the opening lyrics are Marshall, Will, and Holly on a routine expedition. Okay. Their last name is Marshall. The dad's name is Rick Marshall. And that always bothered me, because I was like, oh, his name's Marshall. And then the kids were named Marshall, the last name. So I'm like, is his name Marshall? And then you find out his name's Rick Marshall. So.
Yes, I know. I think obviously Rick, they could have said the dad. No, it doesn't really. I don't know.
Yeah, Dad, Will, and Holly. And they were played by Spencer Milligan, played the dad, Rick Marshall.
Yes.
And Wesley Ure.
Yep.
Who was just credited as Wesley.
He was for the first season, or the first and second season?
The first two seasons, if you watch, he just has one name, like Elvis or Charo or Prince.
Come on, Holly, let's go. To the land of the lost.
I'm like, what's that all about?
Well, you know why? I mean, we're sort of jumping all over the shop. But he was originally at the tail end of Land of the Lost, or no, it would have been earlier. He was looking to be the replacement for David Cassidy on the Partridge Family.
Oh, I did not know that. I knew he was a singer.
Yeah, he's a singer, and he was offered work on on Broadway, actually, at the time of the audition. Yep. So and for a number of episodes at the end, later on in the season, he fashioned a banjo /
yes, he
guitar,
did. Yeah,
and he would sing a song at the end, and I think they were trying to making him into a bit more of a like a David Cassidy, Sean Cassidy, a pop idol, because he had the looks, he could sing, and yes, but I did find that funny that it was just Wesley.
Yeah, and I'm like, wow, what's something? Or maybe his name was Wes Lee, like Stan Lee.
Oh, yes.
Lee. But no, that was the thing. And like you said, they show up. They were on a routine expedition, as we learned in the song. And that little life raft of theirs had a lot of stuff in it. It was like Gilligan's Island. They packed more than they needed for just a 3-hour tour. Yes. These guys were on a routine expedition, yet they had lanterns and flares and I don't think they had a change of clothes, because Holly, played by
Kathy Coleman.
She had the plaid shirt and the red jeans or corduroys for like the entire time they were there. And the dad had that Indiana Jones adventurer shirt.
Yes.
With the little things on the thing, so in case you're putting rope on, it doesn't slide off your shoulder. I guess that's what they're there for. And so they got sucked into the Land of Lost. And like you said, you just find them there when the show first opens. But they were really good about it, because even though this is a kid's show, this is a very evolved, intricate storyline for just a Saturday morning, 10 o'clock on a Saturday kid show, because it was a real science fiction program. At least in the beginning it was. And then it started getting crazy. Did you know, Ed, it was created by David Gerrold, who was of Star Trek fame, who created The Trouble with Tribbles and other science fiction stories?
I only just discovered that there's a lot of actual Star Trek links, because DC Fontana wrote an episode. There's a Walter Koenig.
Walter Koenig, who played Chekhov. Yeah, he
wrote an episode as well. So there was a lot of this sort of Star
besides
Trek.
Those guys, there's Larry Niven.
Yes.
There's Ben Bova. There's Norman. I can't think of his last name. Strenerad or something like. He's another science fiction author. But yeah, these were like top name science fiction writers. who were writing this kids show.
Which
So that's why it has a lot of weird concepts for a Saturday morning show.
it does. And when I read that and then I rewatched the episodes, I was
Mm.
expecting something a little bit more, I think. And
Yeah.
especially in those early episodes, the dialogue between the brother and sister are
Yeah.
really, God, gee, golly, I've got to get the
Yeah,
water.
yeah.
Come on, sis, let's.
I watched that one too. Yeah. And then they mentioned
It wasn't bad, and again,
No,
it's aimed at
it was
kids.
kind of Disney-esque, you know.
Yes, but
Well,
I
it's
do.
funny. Go
I was
ahead.
just going to say they just reminded me of it just reminded me of Greg and Cindy from the
Yeah, it
Brady
was like a
Bunch.
Brady Bunch. Yeah, Brady Bunch got sucked
yeah.
into a time portal.
Yeah,
And they
pretty
weren't
much
on they weren't on the Earth. They were actually in another
another dimension because it
another
had a number of
dimension, or
moons.
yeah, they had a couple moons there, and then of course the animals that lived there were dinosaurs, but they weren't our dinosaurs because they also had some other people like the Slee Stack who were terrifying. I mean, I talk about scared. Those things, they might not have moved fast, but let me tell you that is the stuff of nightmares.
They were really terrifying. They actually only had three Slee Stack
three
costumes.
costumes. Yeah.
But they really, through clever editing and everything like that, they looked like
it looked like they had like at least 6 sometimes. No, they did good editing job. It's funny you mentioned Walter Koenig Chekhov because the episode he wrote introduced Enig, who was the smart Slee Stack. He was kind of shorter in stature and he had a different coloring and he wore a little tunic.
Yes.
Now the thing of it is his actual name was supposed to be Enig, which was Gene spelled backwards, which was Walter Koenig's salute to Gene Roddenberry of Star Trek fame. But for some reason, they changed it from Enig to Enoch with a K sound. So I don't know, it just went that way. So yeah, he was on there, and he's going to play a big part of the show because he's on like the entire 3 seasons of the show, longer than the dad was.
Yes.
And then of course they slowly introduced the world that they lived in. They didn't shove it all in one episode. They had Chaka, who was part of the Pakani, which is kind of like a weird a human missing link type of thing, like a baby Sasquatch, if you want to put it.
Yeah, a little bit like that. I mean, it was interesting as well that, it wasn't just they introduced a proper language for Chaka and his family. They had a linguistics expert come in to do this. So there was a lot of solid ideas and thought put into the show, which I didn't really appreciate at the time. I don't think.
No, as a kid, you just want to watch some entertainment for 25 minutes and you're like, hey, this is really cool. And like I said, it wasn't like any of the other shows. It wasn't like any of the other Sid and Marty Krofft. It wasn't like Siggy the Sea Monster or the Bugaloos or anything like that. It was a serious science fiction show. In fact, I wonder if it ran at a later hour, could it have been more adult? It could have been more like a Time Tunnel or Land of the Giants or a Lost in Space type of thing. They could have played it for real,
Well, it was. I mean, it was serious. There were some lighthearted moments, but it was really about them surviving and how do they try, like in anything, like in any series like Voyager or Quantum Leap. How do you get back home?
They always try to get home. Yeah, that was like the key element there. But they weren't the only people there. Like I mentioned, Enoch was there. Did you see I don't know if you remember, but there was an episode where they meet like a Civil War soldier who stuck.
That was actually the last episode, if I'm not mistaken, the last episode of the last season, and it wasn't supposed to be the finale, but it had they had a Native American, Indian, and they had a cavalryman in it.
Yeah,
and it was a bit of a lackluster, season finale. I don't think they were expected it to end really.
That soldier was also like he was sitting in his little cave drinking mushroom tea. What was that all about? It was a 70s thing. I'm like, okay, he's on his own little land of the lost. Now, let me just tell you.
Yeah.
They didn't know they were coming back for a season 2. In fact, season 1 has an episode. I thought that was the final episode. It's called The Circle, where Enig shows them the time portal.
Yep.
And the dad's there, and they actually did get home, They did in the first season. You know how? They found out that there's a time loop. And that opening shot where they're going down that 1,000-foot waterfall, the dad saw it, and Enoch explained to him, yeah, Rick, Holly, and I just Marshall, Will, and Holly,
Will,
Rick,
yeah.
Marshall, Will, and Holly could go home, but another Marshall, Will, and Holly have to come back to replace them. So it was it was like Groundhog Day
Yes.
in the Land of Lost. So it had to be permanently circled. It was like infinity loop or something like that. So what happened is they did leave. They jumped through the portal at the end, but at the same exact time, another Marshall, Will, and Holly fall down the 1,000-foot waterfall and end up back in the cave, and it starts all over again. So the show is actually like a continual loop.
So they only really needed to do one season because
they only did because they thought they were going to get canceled. They didn't realize they were coming back for a second season. So they said, if this is the way it ends, you could go up to the last episode and then start with your DVD collection or VHS or whatever and hit rewatch. Yeah. And it would start again and again and again because that's the whole show. It's just that group stuck in that time thing. Yeah, so that was pretty clever for its time. You know?
Yeah, look, I agree. Again, the concepts were pretty highbrow, I think, and the thought put into it. There were some really good characters. You mentioned Shaka as well. The dinosaurs were, I suppose, the star of the series, even though the opening the opening sequence or the opening credits made the dam sequence in Superman the movie look like documentary footage.
Come on, there was claymation. I mean, it was high tech.
I've got to say, the thing is, they did stop animation and they filmed. Yes. They used that on film, and the rest of the show, the live action portion, was filmed on video.
Yeah,
and I know they had some issues trying to marry the two together. And I was watching a little documentary with Sid and Marty Krofft, and he was saying they got even Disney in at the time to try and sort out the problems because they didn't know how they were going to do it. But it was pretty successful. I've got to say,
as we know, Ed.
Yep.
It's not easy working with green screen.
I know.
Because it could be really scary sometimes. Let's just say that.
It can be, but the effects, the video effects and the green screen that they used actually is really effective. There's no matte lines around
no, you don't get that green haze that you tend to get from green screen or blue screen.
And that's just because of the light, because of the
lighting.
The lighting didn't match up. But if they matched up the lighting, it actually would have been really quite effective. The scene where Holly is riding Dopey is as good as anything
Anakin riding
Attack of the Clones.
I was going to say Anakin riding that big thing in on Naboo, whatever it was.
So I mean that's pretty good. So and for a kids TV show, I think the effects were pretty good. There's good old Dopey there.
There's Dopey. Hey, I'm right here.
Yeah.
Oh. So no, there was Dopey. There was Grumpy, who was the T-Rex, who actually, if you look, it's a hand puppet close up. And he doesn't have a hole in the back of his mouth. So he couldn't have swallowed you because it was just
I know. That was pretty bad.
Well, then there was Big Alice, who was an Allosaurus.
Yes.
And I believe there was another one. Oh, wasn't there one with like
there was
Spike?
a two
there was
a two there was the Stegosaurus, I think there was.
Stegosaurus, yeah.
And there was in season 3, they got a little bit more fantastical where they had like 2-headed dragon type dinosaurs. And things like that.
Yeah. Well, we're jumping ahead a bit.
I know.
So go back. We had the Slee Stack, and then there was a lot of weird stuff in there. There was one episode I remember where there was some kind of creature like a Yeti that lived up in the mountains and was coming down. It was just a guy in a gorilla suit, a grayish gorilla suit. It was pretty bad. And it's like he would go over and attack the Slee Stack and steal their eggs. And he was like, because they were reptiles, so they hatched eggs. I don't even know how the Slee Stack did all that. But the Slee Stack were interesting too, because you remember how they had that monster that lived in the bottom of the pit?
Yes.
It was like they never showed it, but you would just hear the growling, and they would always they would try to feed the Marshall family to it or whoever, or sometimes there would be a guest star, they would fall into the pit and they died. I heard David Gerald said that it was going to be revealed that it wasn't this big monster you thought it was. It was actually really small. But they never got around to showing what was in there, so it was always left to your imagination. But again, when I was like 8 years old, that was damn scary, man. I'm like, what is down in that pit that they're all fighting over, you know? And I'm trying to remember. They always had a thing with crystals.
Yes.
I don't know where I just put my crystals, but they would go into those pylons or skylons, and they'd start fooling around, and
Yep.
they'd start pressing these things, and then next thing you know, they would have a portal door open, and they'd go through it, and if they didn't get there in time or they hit the wrong combination,
Or
it was always a plague.
or
to
they
them.
gets knocked over by an earthquake, and they
That
can't get their
happened.
dad back. Or,
Actually, that's what happened. The reason why the dad left, Spencer Milligan, is for money issues. I think he wanted more, and plus he was kind of mad that they were merchandising the heck out of it with board games and lunch boxes and you name it. And he wanted a little piece of the action, and they said no. So next thing you know, he gets shoved through a time portal.
and it wasn't
Uncle
even him.
Jack-
It was a stage. It was a
'cause you
stage
saw him
hand
from
with a
behind,
wig
you just
on.
saw curly head of hair going, ah!
And then they changed the whole the opening theme song, and they
Yeah.
brought his Uncle Jack, who had been
Uncle
looking for him for, they had been looking for them. Apparently, who knows?
Well, he was on the
exactly.
same trajectory and it was that same raft. So it wasn't the greatest earthquake of it all because Uncle Jack got sucked into it too. Now, the funnier thing is Uncle Jack is played by actor Ron Harper,
Mhm.
who was on the Planet of the Apes TV show.
Was he one of the
was blonde
astronauts?
guy. Yeah, he was the blonde guy that went into the future. Remember there was Naughton, who it was
Yep.
kind of like Starsky and Hutch
It
looking
was.
guys
Yeah,
on-
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
He was the blonde fella. So I'm thinking this guy, you could have tied everything together. He could have been the astronaut who went to the Planet of the Apes who somehow got lost and ended up going into the land of the lost
Yes.
and went back in time. But no, that was the same actor. Now you got to wonder, was that a step down? Because Planet of the Apes show was already canceled, so he was out of work. So by the time he came on in 76, he
I
needed
think,
a job.
well, it's a kid, kids show, I suppose. You might be
Yeah.
that, he might look down on that, but I think actors are happy to be in work. So I think that's
Yeah,
probably,
yeah.
he seemed to enjoy the experience. And I suppose it's always tough coming in to,
An
replace
established
someone
show. Yeah.
and things like that. But you did say, that he was, the original Rick Marshall was after, a little bit more money and the merchandising. This was a big hit. Normally,
Oh, it was huge.
Sid and Marty
Yeah.
Krofft shows, maybe run one season.
One and
Right.
done, yeah.
Electra, what is it? Electra Woman and
Oh
Dinah
no,
Girl.
there was a Electra Woman and Dinah Girl, the one with this dune buggy, Wonder Bug. Wonder
That's right.
Bug.
Yes.
And then there was the one I always tell you about was Bigfoot and Wild Boy. But those were after though. Those were in the 77, 78. So this was their first big multi-year.
it ran for obviously ran for 3
seasons, yeah.
seasons. So it was a really big hit. Most of them
Yeah.
were shorter seasons and didn't get picked up and they'd move on to the next thing. And that's,
Yeah.
I suppose, after the popularity of it, because there were, they didn't do, I think they did a Holly Marshall action, like a doll, but they did, as you said, board games, lunch
Yeah.
boxes, a lot of those, rack toys.
Yep.
In fact,
With
the
slap
latest
logo on
edition
it, yeah.
of the Plaid Stallions Toy Ventures magazine focuses on Land of the Lost. I just saw that coming up today, actually, as we're talking about it. So there was a lot of toys and things like that. But I suppose it also regained popularity when they repackaged it along with a lot of the other in the Sid and Marty Krofft Super Show, which is basically like a repackaging of all their greatest hits TV shows.
Yeah, because they had like 44 or 48 episodes or something like that. So that's a lot of shows, and you figure they could run them 5 days a week.
Yep.
Monday through Friday, and maybe Saturday or something. But you got a good month's worth of shows just on Land of the Lost. And like you said, you could replace it with Puff and Stuff or Sigmund and the Sea Monsters, whatever. Because I remember watching it first run from 74 to 76.
Mm-hmm.
But then it was on forever because it would be on like in the early 80s. You'd see it in syndication. And then it ran on the Sci-Fi Channel over here for a while. And then they brought it back. I think we might be jumping ahead, but
that's okay. Let's go.
We'll finish it with the 74. So it goes this thing, like you said, they try to make Wesley Ure a pop star because I did wonder why he was strumming the banjo, because that episode I mentioned where the monster comes down from the hills and they had to replace the statue that was keeping him away.
That's right. Yes.
They're sitting at the very end of the episode. They're just like hanging out. And he has this homemade guitar thing, and he goes, "Hey, Will, why don't you just play us a song?" And then, of course, the dubbing is like, "Well, where'd this band just come in?"
Yep.
But it was even creepier was Uncle Jack was kind of like massaging Holly's shoulders while they're doing this, which I was really bothered by when I watched it the other day, because they're all on YouTube. I mean, I didn't have the box set. I wish I did, because one of the box sets came with a replica lunchbox. Oh, that was sweet. It was a replica lunchbox and the discs were inside. And I went to go look on eBay, and that thing is like $200 right now. I'm like,
okay.
what? And that, I don't know if the one you have, but there was a lot of extras that they had.
Yeah, so
like
this
the
is
making of and interviews. Yeah.
this is the Australian version. And what do you get? There's commentaries, interviews, and a few other things on here. So I know that some of the writers and some of the cast provide commentaries on there as well. So this is a region 4 because it's Australian DVD, but you can find, I'm sure you'll be able to find those on eBay if you don't want to get the lunchbox, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I just wanted the lunchbox. Now, the funnier thing is they brought it back in the 90s, 91 and 92.
Yeah, with Timothy Bottoms.
Now, I know Timothy Bottoms from a movie called Roller Coaster.
Oh,
where
yes.
he was this like bad guy in the 70s. He was blowing up roller coasters, and it was in Sensurround. This is so 70s, it's not funny. Sensurround was this giant loudspeaker subwoofer that they'd put in the front of the theater, and whenever there'd be a loud rumbling sound like a tank or an airplane or a roller coaster, they would turn it on so your seats would shake.
Yep.
And
in fact, I think we spoke about this back on episode when we were talking about drive-ins and Super 8 movies.
Yes, that's right.
Because Earthquake was in Sensurround as well.
Yep.
So
there was a lot. Yeah, there was a lot of those.
Yep.
Midway was surround sound.
Yep.
The Big War Picture. I remember my dad taking me to see that. But anyway, Timothy Bottoms also is in East of Eden with Karen Allen. That's another story there.
Mm-hmm.
And he was in The Last Picture Show, which is a pretty famous movie. Mm-hmm. With Sybil Shepherd and such. But anyway, he's the new dad, and they don't have a life raft this time. They have a SUV, like a truck.
Yes.
And it gets caught in a landslide, and the ground opens up.
Yeah, they split open and they go in.
Yeah. But I don't know. The raft seemed like a better idea because how much stuff you putting in your car? And they had more money on this show. So they had better makeup effects. And we did have the Sleestak come back. They looked pretty much the same. But then they had some weird little dinosaur guy. He was like
he looked a little bit like, if you've seen the Jim Henson show Dinosaurs, which were sort of like humanoid dinosaurs. So they had him Shaka. I think he wasn't Shaka, but it was
called Stink the Monkey Boy.
Yeah, was the character. I did watch an episode of it, and it was quite funny where it was all about dreams, and they were able to their dreams became reality. It was some sort of a crystal that would, cause problems. There's Shaka behind.
You can't mess with a good thing. You need Shaka the remote.
Yeah.
Look at that.
But it was funny. They were able to watch TV
really?
in Land of Lost. And you know what the show they were watching, his favorite show?
The show? The Mitch and Ed's
Electra Woman. No, it was Electra Woman and Dinah Girl.
Well, where did they get the broadcast signal from?
Because it was part of their dreams. It was all.
I was going to say.
But I thought it wasn't called that in there, but I'm going, there's a bit of good old Sid and Marty Croft cross promotion, which was kind
plugging
of
their own stuff.
So that went reasonably well.
It also, 2 years. That was a good run. Yeah.
And they made a lot of, there was action figures, there was play sets and things like that. So it was pretty popular. And the reason that came to fruition was because that in syndication, Land of the Lost was really quite popular. So they thought they'll do a bit of a reboot of it. And then I suppose,
I was just going to say what they did with the Land of the Lost reboot is they brought it back and this and that, but I don't think, no, I know they didn't. They were going to tie it into the original Land of the Lost. And in fact, they had written a scene where Holly was grown up now.
Yes.
And was going to come in as like a jungle woman type of thing or something, like a Tarzan character. And that was supposed to be Holly from the original show.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what happened, contract negotiation, whatever, but they didn't get the original actress. They did bring that character in, but it wasn't Holly anymore. Yep. It was a different character. So I don't know if you had that in your notes, but
I did.
That's
I did
bullshit.
see that, and that it didn't happen. So I figured it was just like I imagine that they were still somewhere
Hmm.
in another part of that
Lost.
lost
Yeah.
world, because obviously they did bring people from different times in all over the place
Oh
and
yeah, yeah,
things
yeah.
like
They
that.
also
So
fought. There wasn't just the Slee Stack. There was this one group that they were like a disco ball. They were just basically in a bodysuit, and they had sparkly things on them. They were some type of alien race, and they would show up and they would just talk to you. You didn't know that character?
that
No.
you've
All right.
described
Well,
my weekend wardrobe. Just
well, it wasn't hard. They would just take the green screen like this.
yeah,
And hello, Ed. How are you? What type of thing, and just come up like that. We could make Land of the Lost now, Ed.
we could.
We could do
Well,
with the magic of computer technology. We could do it again.
I've got my little. Let's see if I can. Let's see if it'll go. Here we go. Look, he's just.
But oh, look at that. That
He's
looks
just
just
getting-
like Dopey or Grumpy. Yeah, see?
There he goes. He'll wag his tail. Oh, he's a little bit.
Now what's that? What's that from?
That's from. Oh, I better tell you.
Is that from Dinosaurs?
No, that's from Tiger Electronics from back in 2009 or 8. Or I think 2009. It's a T-Rex pet, which is kind of cool. Which brings us to 2009, where they brought out, crazily, a live-action version of Land of the Lost.
With Will Ferrell,
Yes.
Danny McBride.
Oh my God, it is.
They spent a lot. I think that movie cost like $200 million.
It cost. I don't think it cost that. I think it would, but it was. It was like $100 million movie, and it made
okay.
and it made $68 million.
Yeah, and Sid and
worldwide.
Marty are on as executive producers, but I think that's kind of what they call a suitcase producer, where they give you a suitcase full of money. And
Yes,
you don't really have any creative control on the project.
Yeah,
because
they weren't very happy with it.
No, they blasted it. They hated it.
It was. I remember going to see it.
Did
Only
you?
based on, obviously, watching it as a kid, and it's not a kids' film
No,
at
no,
all. And
no.
I hate it. One of my many bugbears is where they have where they take a property and they just
Yeah.
I don't know why they made it an adult film. It just didn't make sense. The
Oh,
visual
no, it
effects
didn't
were
make
nice
sense.
and everything like that, but
Lee Stack were in it, and
Yep.
they had Chaka, but of course they got to do like sex jokes, like, oh, Chaka's half man, and like a bestiality type of joke, and that was in there. And of course they get stoned
yeah.
on some kind of mushroom stuff, and then there's the dinosaurs, and it's just it's a bad movie. It's just
Well,
it's not good. I mean,
No, it's awful, and they've been doing that recently. There was a Banana Splits movie.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah, it has nothing to do with the movie, the show. It's
Isn't it
just a bunch of-
isn't it like a horror movie?
It's a horror movie. It's a slasher movie where the Banana Splits characters become like homicidal robots that go out and kill people gruesomely with like sticks in the eye and chopping them up. It's horrible. Because I was like, I love the Banana Splits.
Yeah,
That's
me
a whole
too.
other show we could do.
Yeah,
And,
I loved watching that as a kid. And with the recent Fantasy Island movie.
I didn't. That opened just when COVID broke out, so luckily we didn't get to see that. Thanks,
Yeah.
COVID. But
Again,
I heard it's
that was
terrible.
so I don't know why.
The worst one was Miami Vice a couple years ago with Jamie Foxx and
That's
Colin
right.
Farrell. They made a Miami Vice movie. The characters had the same names, but it was nothing to do with the TV show. Even though Michael Mann made it, the guy who created Miami Vice,
That's right.
it was horrible. I could we should do a show of TV remade movies that are just bad. Like they did the Starsky and Hutch one, which was kind of like a comedy.
That was
It was
okay.
Yeah. And then
You know,
Starsky and Hutch showed up at the end.
yeah.
And did you know that Wesley and Holly, again, I forgot her name, were supposed to be in as a cameo in the Will Ferrell movie, but they cut it. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Because I mean, that would have been some saving grace if you saw the original.
Why did they cut it?
I don't know. They filmed it. I think you could find it on YouTube, maybe the deleted
Okay.
scene, or it's on the DVD, which I don't
Okay.
have.
I don't think I'll be.
No,
It's a pretty awful film. It's
is
much
pretty-
better.
It was one of the worst movies of the year. I remember it won like the Razzies for like, a terrible picture. And like
Yeah,
you said,
well,
um,
it wasn't great, but I mean, at least we still have the original series to, you know, to go
no,
back
and
to
there
and
is some
watch.
merchandise out there. There is a Land of the Lost comic book that came
Mhm.
out in the 40s and 50s, but that has nothing to do with the TV
Oh,
show. It was
I was
just the
going to
title.
say, oh, I'm going to
No,
have
no,
to
no,
fact
no.
check. What?
No, I looked it up. There was Land of the Lost because I was looking for a Land of the Lost comic book, and there was an original series called that, but it has nothing to do with the TV show. There's Funko Pops, they're like with everything, and it's a Slee Stack, an Enoch, and they were a San Diego 2017, of course, exclusive, and they go for a pretty penny on eBay. I think they're like 60 to a couple $100, depending on which one you got. There is a Pez dispenser, which I have, and I could not find it before we recorded tonight. Trust me, I was having enough computer problems. They do have a little Pez candy dispenser with a Slee Stack
Oh,
head on it,
yes.
and that's kind of cool.
I mean, I
And
suppose that's the legacy of the show, really. Those Slee Stacks were,
oh yeah,
great character design,
you
and
could
that's the
play
one
that
thing.
sound, and anybody that's I'd say 40 and up would just get scared, chills up their back when they hear
Yep.
that. You could always outrun a Slee Stack. Let me just tell you, they weren't fast.
No, well, they couldn't see out of their eyes. That's why.
And they couldn't go out in the daylight, and
Yeah.
they hated fire. And
Yeah.
I think cold made them, they were lizards, they were giant reptile
Yeah.
people. So if it was cold out, they would just kind of stand there and they'd hibernate or something,
Yeah.
you know?
But they were
So,
pretty good villains of the
scary.
piece, and I think it was quite interesting, their history and the way that they
Richard
weaved
Keel was in it.
everything. Sorry?
Richard Keel was in an episode
He
too.
was. He was.
Yeah, he played this guy named Malik, which is huge, big jaws, Richard Keel from the James
He's
Bond
been,
movie.
he's been,
We
we
should do a
spoke about him
retrospect on
last
him.
episode about
Yeah.
from the Incredible Hulk. So
Yeah, and plus he was in the Twilight Zone, and he was, wasn't he in one of those Bruce Lee movies? Or am I getting him confused with another tall actor? Maybe I'm getting him confused.
I don't know.
Well,
I'll
we
have a
should
look.
do a retrospect on Richard Keel.
We could. Who's has the same birthday as me?
Well, that's enough for a show right there.
That's right. Absolutely.
No,
Absolutely.
so anyway, Lunchbox. I'm just trying to think if there's anything we forgot on it. It's a good show, though. I mean,
Look,
if
it
you've
is
never
good,
seen-
and I think it's worth revisiting. Stick through some of the hokey dialogue, and some of the actual concepts in the show are quite good. The visual effects are pretty good for the time as well, and are quite interesting the way they marry, stop animation and live action, and it's kind of good, seeing dinosaurs on screen.
on stage. Oh my God, it was like
That
a
would be
Broadway
cool.
work.
That
That'd
would
be
cool.
something. Chaka sings solo.
Yeah, maybe you could do some Shaka Khan. That would be kind of good.
What kind of fool am I? But he would never say the words. He would just kind of accentuate the sounds. Chaka. What would Chaka think of tonight's show?
I don't know. We probably could have got
Paul
Philip Paley on the show.
Paul Paley. Yeah, we could have
Yeah.
got him on the show. In fact, they do conventions, actually. That's a good point. They do revivals. I've seen videos, and maybe, I don't know. I mentioned Land of the Lost a couple months ago on my Facebook page, and I couldn't believe how many likes, over a couple hundred likes. So maybe that's a potential guest for a future Terrificon here.
Well, maybe you could, get Wesley, Kathy, and Philip on. That would be pretty good, I think.
Yeah.
So,
And they're all, the cast is still alive. Spencer Milligan, he's up there. He's in his, I think he's got to be in his 70s. Though. He lives in Texas.
yes.
And Ron Harper's in his 80s. He's still around, Uncle Jack. And yeah, Wesley and Holly, yeah, they're all in Chaka. I don't know about Enoch. I didn't look him up, but
No.
maybe.
Well, that would be kind of good. And is Walter Koenig still with us? He is, isn't he?
Yes. Well, yeah, Chekhov's still around. Yeah.
So you could get him, and how
David
that'll be-
Gerald is on my Facebook friends, which I was like, hey, I know that guy. So there
there
you
you
go.
go. You could have the land of the not so lost. They're the
They're
land
we
of the
found.
found.
Found. Yeah, found.
There you
Actually,
go.
I would watch a sequel, like, if they did a special,
Yep.
and they kind of wrapped up the whole show.
Yep.
Why not nowadays? You could do, like I said, with the green screen technology, they were the Lucasfilm of their time. It was like the Phantom Menace of Saturday morning TV, all green screen,
That's right. Yeah, the Slee Stacks are just essentially Gungans, really, aren't they? So
Yeah, they are, and all the dinosaurs are basically all the big dinosaurs that they had in the
That's
Phantom
right.
Menace.
That's
It's
right.
the same show.
that's
And
right.
Chaka's a baby Wookiee. He's like an Ewok.
He's just an extra from the holiday special. So
Oh, that's not.
hey, there's an episode we have to do.
Oh yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. All right. Well, I
When
guess
did that come out? That would have come out. Was that-
1978, Ed.
yeah, I know that, but I'm just thinking, what month was that?
November. It was November. It was right around Thanksgiving. Yes.
All right, guess what?
Date.
There's one of our November shows.
Oh God.
But that could be something that we will be looking
But
at.
it had the Boba Fett cartoon.
It did. And because of that, we've got Mandalorian, and that's coming out
That's
October
right.
30th. We've got a lot of fun things to talk about. Remember, if you've got a suggestion for our show, like the show or something like that, please subscribe. Make sure you hit the bell so you get an alert when we've got a new show. But also suggest some ideas. We've had some we had some suggestions about looking at some more Spielberg films, about Star Wars again, which we will. Looking at the Narnia series. I love the Chronicles of Narnia, the movies and things like that. So there's lots to be speaking about in the wonderful world that is pop culture.
Yes. And maybe we'll go back and look at the rest of Sid and Marty Krofft stuff.
I think so. I was a big fan of Siggy and the Sea Monsters. Sigmund, if you want. Okay, Sigmund, fine.
Yeah, unless you know him personally. Well, Ed, you know what? I think it's going to wrap it up. I'm going to start making my own Sid and Marty Krofft show. Oh my God, Ed! I'm being sucked into a
down
time
the land of
portal.
the lost.
Ed, help, Ed! Get the crystals.
Be careful.
Where are they?
All your change will fall out of your pockets. Be careful.
Here we are. Get eating. I think that's it, Ed.
I think that's it. All right. This is Ed Dollister.
This is Mitch Alec.
And you've been watching Mitch and Ed's Excellent Adventure. Take care, and we'll see you next episode.
Bye.